On November 5th, 2025, a chair remained empty in a room of the Russian Security Council. It wasn't just any chair, it was the seat of Sergei Lavrov, the man who served as foreign minister for 21 years, the diplomatic face of Russia to the entire world. Putin was there presiding over a meeting about resuming nuclear tests. Lavrov was not. No one explained why, no one needed to. In today's Russia, absence says more than any official statement. 2 decades ago, something like this would have been unthinkable because there was an agreement, an unwritten but absolutely real pact that defined who survived and who fell in Putin's system. And that pact has just been broken. The year is 2000. Vladimir Putin has just taken over the presidency of a devastated country. The 90s left Russia on its knees. While chaos took over the streets, a small group of men took advantage to loot the remains of the Soviet Union. They were called oligarchs. Through shady deals, rampant corruption, and crimes that no one dared to investigate, this handful of individuals took control of vast parts of the Russian economy. They had private jets, mansions, entire companies, and, more importantly, they had political power. Putin summoned them. 21 men, the richest and most powerful in Russia, gathered in the Kremlin. What happened in that room would define the next 25 years. Putin didn't shout. He didn't make explicit threats. He simply presented the new rules. You can keep everything, the mansions, the jets, the billions. I'm not going to investigate how you got those fortunes in the 90s, but in return, you stay away from politics, completely away. Accept my authority, dismantle any political structure you control, and never, ever challenge me. Many agreed, because they realized that this man was not negotiating, and those who accepted were rewarded. Their fortunes multiplied, their positions solidified. Loyalty was the currency, wealth for political silence, protection for absolute obedience. But there was a second side to the deal. Those who broke the pact were destroyed publicly, theatrically, so that everyone could see and understand. Mikhail Khodorkovsky learned this the hard way. He was the richest man in Russia, in 2003 owner of the oil giant Yukos. Khodorkovsky made a fatal mistake. He believed that his money gave him political power, started funding opposition parties, and openly criticized Putin. In October of that year, masked agents of the Russian secret police stormed his plane at an airport in Siberia. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. His company was broken up and nationalized. The message was crystal clear. Wealth is not power. Loyalty is power. Vladimir Gusinsky was the second example. He built a media empire that included NTV, Russia's only independent television network. His crime? NTV criticized the Kremlin, covered the brutal war in Chechnya honestly, and worse, aired a satirical puppet show that ridiculed Putin. In May, 2,000 commandos with machine guns stormed NTV's offices. Gusinsky was arrested in June, accused of stealing $10 million. He fled abroad. His network was taken over by Gazprom, which is controlled by the state. The message, once again, was clear. There is no independent media. No criticism is allowed. That was the system. Brutal, yes. Authoritarian, no doubt, but stable. The rules were well known. Accept my authority, and you prosper. Challenge me, and you disappear. For 22 years, this pact worked perfectly. Putin consolidated absolute power, while his loyal elite grew rich in exchange for their silence. It was predictable, it was rational, it was the foundation of Putin's system. And then came February 2022, the large-scale invasion of Ukraine. What was supposed to be an operation lasting days turned into a devastating war of attrition. Billions were poured into the war effort. The military budget skyrocketed, and defeats on the battlefield began to pile up. Loyalty was no longer enough for the first time. The system needed efficiency, it needed results, and someone had to pay for the failures. In 2024, Putin removed Sergei Shoigu, his longtime Minister of Defense. It wasn't just a change of minister, it was a total elimination. In the following months, dozens of officials from the Ministry of Defense were arrested. 3 former deputy ministers, generals, bureaucrats. Shoigu himself was spared, but his entire power network was dismantled. He watched helplessly as decades of alliances were destroyed. It was a message. No matter how long you have served, if there is visible failure, if there is too much apparent corruption, you will be eliminated. But the Ministry of Defense made sense, right? It was an elimination linked to war, to military competence, to the need for results on the battlefield. What no one expected was that this was just the beginning, that the machine wouldn't stop there. Sergei Markov was everything Putin could want in an ally: a respected political scientist, an influential journalist, a professor at prestigious institutions like Moscow State University. For more than 20 years, he was one of Putin's closest advisors. He called the president one of the great men in history. He was a member of the Public Chamber of Russia for several years. Elected to the Duma in 2007, trusted spokesperson in the 2012 elections. He constantly appeared in the Western media defending the Kremlin, repeating the official propaganda word for word. When the war began, Markov did exactly what was expected. He said it wasn't a war against Ukraine, but to liberate Ukraine. He talked about imaginary Nazis, called the invasion a humanitarian intervention, blamed the United States. He did everything right. In August 2025, the Russian Ministry of Justice classified Sergei Markov as a foreign agent. That label is reserved for traitors, for those whom the Kremlin believes are conspiring with other countries. Markov didn't betray anyone. His crime? He publicly praised the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, in an interview. He called Aliyev a skilled leader, nothing else. For 2 decades of absolute loyalty, a single sentence of praise for another leader was enough to destroy him. Markov, shocked, stated that the decision was strange and surprising, that he had always supported the special operation. It didn't matter. Alexei Alyokhin was a minor oligarch, but perfectly aligned. Director of an arms factory, he publicly supported the war, donated to the military effort, and participated in pro-Kremlin events. He also drove imported luxury cars, while ordinary Russians faced severe sanctions. This visible hypocrisy bothered someone. A nationalist military blogger named Alexander Kotz began to attack him publicly. He accused Alyokhin of corruption, of living a luxurious life at the expense of the Russian people during wartime. In September, Alyokhin was labeled as a foreign agent. A few days later, he was arrested, formally charged with large-scale fraud. His real crime? Having too much visible wealth, enemies with platforms, and being in the wrong place when the machine needed a new victim. 5 years ago, men like Alyokhin were untouchable. As long as they showed loyalty, they could be as corrupt as they wanted. It was part of the deal. Now the deal doesn't exist anymore. Tatiana Montyan was born in Crimea, studied law in Moscow, lived in Kiev, where she became a lawyer in high-profile political cases, opposed the pro-European protests in 2013, and defended controversial pro-Russian figures. When the war started, she left Ukraine and went to Russia. She became a constant presence on Russian television. A Ukrainian supporting the invasion of her own country was gold for the propaganda machine. It proved that the war was just, that even Ukrainians supported Moscow. In October 2025, Montyan was not only labeled as a foreign agent, she was designated a terrorist and extremist, one of the harshest classifications the Kremlin can apply. Her bank accounts were frozen. She was placed under total state surveillance. The government didn't say why. There are reports that she embezzled money she raised for troops on the front line. And she made another mistake. She spoke about war crimes and total disorder at the front. Criticism, even coming from an ally, was unacceptable. Montyan should have had a comfortable life in Moscow. Television shows, security, recognition. Instead, she faces a completely uncertain future, treated as an enemy of the state. Then there's Lavrov, the empty chair, the man who dedicated his entire life to the Russian state, entered politics in the 80s. He meticulously climbed the ranks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and became Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations. He became Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2004. For 21 years, he was Russia's diplomatic voice, unshakable, indispensable, until November 2025. First, the unexplained absence at the Security Council meeting on nuclear testing. Then, the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, announced that Lavrov had been replaced as the head of the Russian delegation for the G20 summit. Peskov made a point of saying that Putin personally made this decision. Lavrov was also replaced at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations summit. His power was publicly collapsing. The reason? A phone call. In October, Lavrov spoke with the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. The goal was to lay the groundwork for a meeting between Putin and President Donald Trump. According to sources, Lavrov was uncompromising and refused to soften Moscow's hardline demands on Ukraine. The call was tense. Rubio recommended that Trump cancel the meeting, and Trump canceled it. Putin needed someone to blame. Lavrov, the veteran diplomat of 2 decades, became the one to blame this time. Peskov was forced to publicly deny the rumors of Lavrov's downfall, which, in Kremlin language, usually confirms that the rumors are true. 4 cases, 4 loyalists. Markov for a compliment, Alyoshin for visible corruption, Montyan for discreet criticism, Lavrov for a diplomatic failure. None of them challenged Putin, none financed the opposition, none criticized the president. They did what they always did, serve, and even so, they were discarded. So, why is this happening? Ekaterina Shulman, a Russian political scientist, has a terrifying theory, and it makes a lot of sense. Think about it this way. First, the Kremlin went after those who were against the war, arrested activists, silenced journalists, and shut down organizations. Now there's no one left in that group. The problem is, the repressive machine can't just stop. Russia's secret police is huge. The security ministries have thousands of people, and all these officers need to show results to get promoted. To justify their gigantic budgets, they rely on finding enemies of the state. That's how the system works. But if you've already eliminated all the opposition, all the critics of the war, all the independent media, who's left? The answer is simple and frightening. The allies themselves, the propagandists, the pro-war bloggers, the loyal officials. The machine needs to feed itself. And now it's devouring people from its own side. But there's another part of this story that makes everything even worse. The entire Russian system is being remade in the fire of war, and in this new brutal environment, the protections that once existed have simply disappeared. Previously, there were limits, untouchable people, and a respected hierarchy. But now, it's every man for himself. Think about Putin's leadership style. He's vague, distant, and doesn't make clear decisions in many situations. Remember the Prigozhin case? The head of Wagner argued publicly with the Ministry of Defense for an entire year. Everyone saw it. Putin did nothing. He let the conflict grow until it turned into an armed rebellion, marching toward Moscow. That indifference created a power vacuum. And in that vacuum, different groups within the government started attacking each other. Markov and Alyoshin weren't eliminated because they committed real crimes. They were eliminated because their rivals, people like the blogger Kots and the propagandist Solovyov, turned them into the repressive system. Why? To protect themselves, to take their assets, to climb the hierarchy, to survive. That's what's happening. The system is literally cannibalizing itself. The elite that supported Putin for decades is shattered. No one trusts anyone anymore. Ministers, oligarchs, propagandists, they're all looking over their shoulders, wondering if they're next. And when you're in that pure survival mode, governing a country effectively becomes impossible. Every official now focuses on two things: attacking rivals before being attacked, and showing absurd levels of loyalty to Putin, hoping that will protect them. And that directly impacts the war. Why? You know what happens when you arrest a general for telling the truth? The next general will probably have to lie. It's that simple. And here's the great irony of all this. Putin started this process wanting total control, wanting to make sure no one could challenge him, wanting to turn loyalty into absolute obedience. But do you know what he really achieved? He unleashed something that even he can't control anymore. He is destroying the support base that sustains his power. He is alienating his own propagandists, turning his most loyal supporters into enemies of the state, imprisoning competent commanders, blaming his most experienced diplomats. The war has exposed all the weaknesses that Russia has carried for decades. Corruption at all levels, intelligence failures, chronic disorganization. That empty Lavrov chair is not just about a diplomat who fell from grace. It's the symbol of a system that has turned against itself. It's proof that loyalty doesn't protect anyone anymore. Now, stop and think. If even Lavrov can fall, then anyone can. And when everyone can fall at any moment, no one is really on anyone's side. Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you think Putin will be able to turn this situation around? Leave your comment down below. If you like this content, don't forget to share it with those who need to understand what's really happening in Russia. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future analyses. See you next time.